There's a website I might mention, BuzzFeed, that specializes in numbered lists. And I noticed today they have 16 horror movies you've got to see before you die, and 11 reasons to live through your 20s. So taking a cue from BuzzFeed, I'm going to offer 9 reasons to like a carbon fee. And specifically, the first key thing to recognize that this notion of carbon pricing in Massachusetts is based on one simple core idea, and that's that if you post a complete price for a product that's underpriced today, people will react to the complete price by using less of it. That's kind of carbon pricing in a nutshell. Massachusetts can legislate a nation-leading strategy against climate change, Mr. Chairman, by applying the simple approach to fossil fuels. Basically, the price of a product should include the expenses associated with it. A second thing among the 9 things to know about carbon pricing is that what we don't see reflected in carbon prices today are the health and environmental effects. That's why so many people are here today. We know enough of the math, we've run enough of the computer simulations, we can compute the external costs of using carbon, the so-called social cost of carbon, add those social costs to what we currently charge for a fossil fuel product, and come up with a full honest price for the stuff, for anything produced from oil, natural gas, or coal. So carbon pricing really is just full pricing. And what we factor in are the downstream environmental and healthcare effects, which we're now able to quantify. Sort of a third thing to know, when you factor in health and environmental effects, the result is to raise the price, and that can be a heavy political lift. So to make this idea of carbon pricing work as public policy and as politics, S 1747, my bill, rebates all the money collected due to the price increases back to consumers and businesses. So the term for this, revenue neutral, is kind of kludgy, makes no sense to the public at first, but once they realize that revenue neutral boils down to the idea that you can fight climate change without imposing a regressive tax, people get it. Point 4 about this stuff, a tax, according to the Mass SJC, is an exaction that generates revenues that go to funding the operations, the general operations of government. It's a simple one-sentence almost definition. When exactions go into a separate fund, as we propose that they do here, so long as they're rebated to the full public at regular intervals, they are not taxes under Massachusetts law. That's a kind of a key policy point and political point to be aware of. We're not asking you to enact a carbon tax. We're suggesting that in Massachusetts we enact a carbon fee. This is effectively is a user fee on pollution, but the sort of acts of pollution that all of us engage in, sometimes without thinking as much about it as we ought to. So point number 5, people, of course, human beings, are price sensitive. That's why so many of us in the legislature worry about co-pays and deductibles in health care. People react to higher prices by finding ways to use less of the thing being priced, and that, again, is just the simple core idea behind carbon pricing. We're simply proposing to harness this, it's almost a basic law of human nature, in order to enlist everyone in Massachusetts in the fight against climate change. Point number 6, and I'm getting close to the total 9, and I appreciate your indulgence. S 1747 phases in this carbon fee very carefully. For the first year of its effect, we would impose a fee of just $10 per metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's essentially a unit of pollution that can carry across all products and all fossil fuels. So just $10, that is not the full social price of carbon that I alluded to a moment ago, the true cost of the health and environmental effects. We start very small, but so did British Columbia, which instructs us in this respect. We don't want the Massachusetts consumer to be reeling from sticker shock. So we phase things in very slowly, but we start to capture these serious health and environmental effects in the hopes that we don't have to socialize them later in the form of higher premiums for insurance and higher expenditures for infrastructure that hardens us against rising ocean levels. So the idea is to capture the true cost up front so that we don't have to pay the cost later on. Number 7 of the 9, and in pushing back against what today is fossil fuel underpricing, this bill doesn't resort to double pricing. For that reason, we don't propose to levy a carbon fee on electricity generation. Electricity prices are already regulated under RGGI. But today, and this is kind of interesting, electricity generation generates only 20% of the carbon dioxide emissions, the greenhouse gas that drives climate change. So we've done a stellar job with regard to electricity generation, so much so that most of the problem, and there's a significant problem remaining, isn't due to electric power. It's due to transportation and due to residential and commercial heating and cooling. We have to get at that nut or we don't win the fight against climate change. So this carbon pricing bill excludes electricity to avoid double feeing, if you will, but focuses on the 80% of the problem that we don't have a great handle on today. Number 8 of the 9 reasons we ought to like carbon fees. We do have a president here to guide us. As you'll hear today, we're proposing that Massachusetts take the lead among the 50 states, but there is British Columbia up in Canada, a state with roughly our population, about 4.5 million, we're 6.5. And British Columbia has done everything essentially that we propose to do here, including introducing the public to this gnarly idea that we ought to properly price something, but that we'll then rebate it so that people don't get zinged more than they could afford to be. Which brings us finally to point number 9, Mr. Chairman. I believe personally, as a legislator, that Massachusetts needs more revenue. That's why I support the drive to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot in 2016 to make the state income tax progressive. But as a separate imperative, we have to step up our fight against climate change. Governor Charlie Baker and legislative leaders can comfortably support this bill and carbon pricing as a concept without violating any no new tax pledges they may have taken. They can still put us in the #1 position among states in the United States that are determined to reduce CO2 and to save the planet. So because this revenue neutral piece makes this a genuinely bipartisan idea, and because you will hear from economists later this afternoon and business people that moderates and conservatives are quite comfortable with carbon pricing, and we have authorities to cite for that. For that reason, I hope that this committee chooses to make headlines by reporting out this bill favorably, and I thank you all for listening today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks. Thank you very much. Senator, any questions for the senator? Representative?
There's a, I understand the exemption for electricity. Is that going to cause a market shift for folks to heat their homes with electricity?
Well, you know, it's a great question. There is a refinement, if you wanted to get really detailed. There is a refinement in which we could take the cap and trade price accorded effectively a metric ton of carbon dioxide pollution to generate electricity and even it up exactly with the carbon fee that would exact an imposition for a metric ton of pollution used for everything else, transportation. So you could layer on the carbon fee on top of RGGI, but that was a refinement that we didn't want to try to make there's an approximate equivalence, and we wanted to stop there. But if this committee wanted to ensure that it takes exactly the same true cost to generate electricity as it does to drive a car, then you would layer on one concept over the other. We wanted to keep this relatively streamlined and elegant, so we avoided taking that additional incremental step.
Is the pricing derived from the RGGI?
No, we don't take, as you know, Representative, RGGI really is a market and the price fluctuates significantly. There are many who would say that the RGGI price per metric ton of pollution is too low even today, although the markets are self-correcting, we hope, and moving up a little bit. In this particular case, though, we kind of have this calculation now of the social cost of carbon, the social cost of the health and environmental effect. By the way, it's about $43 per metric ton of CO2 equivalent. We would work up slowly, would take us 7 years, to $40 a metric ton under this particular bill. the committee may very well want to take a look at our handiwork, but we're trying to get there, but get there in a graduated way that doesn't leave people reeling from the adjustment.